Hey, what's going on? My name's Robert, and you are watching Southpaw Auto Works. This is the new process 435. In this video, Andy is going to show what it takes to completely disassemble this manual transmission. He'll be including basic disassembly techniques, as well as some pro tips and tricks that'll help make the job that much easier. Without further ado, let's get the show on the road.
We're going to switch gears on you here a little bit from automatic to standard transmission. We've got a good old new process 435 4-speed trans here. All right, we want to open this up and take a little look for a customer of ours. He had it in an early Bronco and want to see what kind of shape it's in, whether it's rebuildable or not. Give you an idea what these look like on the inside, give you an idea how to get them apart. These are very desirable, I guess, for the rock crawler guys because these have an extremely low first gear, or what they used to call granny low first gear. Okay, we say low, but numerically it's a very high number. Like I believe these are like six something to 1 in first gear. So for a rock crawler, excellent for that. Just makes a weird transition shift on a daily driver if you're taking off in low gear and shifting to second. So no big deal. Identification on this one, it's got some markings and stuff, but real quick way they say to identify the new process as compared to the T18, T19 they had out there is you've got a cast iron case, which of course our magnet's going to stick to on the 435 aluminum. Okay, that's supposed to be the giveaway for your new process 435. Not a cast iron top like a T18, T19, and some of the others. So we did notice right away on this unit, it does not appear to want to turn whatsoever, even with the pliers on it, okay? I looked down in the shift tower. It looks like it's in a position of a gear, possibly first or second gear. I can't tell real good from looking down in there. So at this point, where I would normally have it in neutral position and disassemble, we're going to leave it where it is because I can't seem to force it out of gear. We'll pull the top cover. Let's take a look and see what we're dealing with. Okay. All right. Depending on what gear we're in, we may or may not be able to get this top cover off. Right now, maybe not. We'll get a screwdriver out, a pry bar. Okay. All right, we got a screwdriver here. We'll see if we can get this cover off. Don't look like we're going to be able to get it released. Yeah. Trying to see if I can tell which synchronizer is engaged so we can get an idea if we can work it back. Right now I can't tell if it's got it into first or reverse gear. I'm going to try and work that with my screwdriver. There we go. Okay. We've got here's a couple of shift forks starting on the back, if you will, and working forward. You got the little reverse shift fork back here, reaches way down around the main shaft itself. Then we've got first and second, third and fourth here. All right. Right away looking at it, looks like the front synchronizer was in fourth gear. I'm going to slide that back. So synchronizers, looks like this was forward in the fourth gear position. Slide that back pretty easy by hand. I could not get the shift forks themselves to move down through the shift tower when I tried it. Quick note here, I'm noticing there's supposed to be these little plastic inserts right here in these shift forks. Okay, and it looks like there's one here, not in very good shape, very paper thin. Okay, Should have been another little tab right here to hold that in place. Is gone, broken off. Okay. And the same thing here. Looks like it doesn't have an insert. So those may have worn and broken off and fallen down inside the trans. Same thing back here, first and second. Those should have a little plastic insert sits right over that fork, okay? And that rides down in this little groove right here. And Andy left his phone on, so we've got plastic inserts missing here, damaged missing here. The reverse shift fork here does not take plastic inserts. It simply sits in the groove further down in the trans. We'll have to try and get a shot of that later, probably during disassembly, so you can see where that rides. So we'll mess with the shift cover a little bit more later in the video, inspect that, see what's going on, if there's any other issues. So like I mentioned, we've got, starting on your standard transmission, normal rear wheel drive, you're always going to work from back to front, and you're going to have first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, also known as input gear. Okay, we will check these out real quick. Now I've got the shifter off, it'll rotate okay. We might have been in two different gears at one time, was the reason that it was bound up and I couldn't turn the input shaft. This is your slider or shifter for your first to second gear. Seems to be pretty free enough. All right, and then third gear there, fourth gear there. All right, well, it should be direct drive. Once again, right there we lock up, but it's probably because our other gears are not in a neutral position. So we'll go ahead and pull the front bearing retainer off real quick. Got the socket out here for this. Take a look there. Like I said, front bearing retainer here. This is where your throwout bearing would ride. This thing's in pretty nasty shape. That would need to be probably replaced. I was going to say sanded down, clean that up, because you want a smooth surface for the throwout bearing to ride, but that's pretty well rusted out. I think I would recommend just replace that. Front bearing retainer. Got the outer race here that fits in that bearing retainer for the input shaft or main shaft itself. And then down in here you've got the input or front seal that also presses into that bearing retainer. Okay. Now let's try and get the rear housing or adapter housing. This is what's going to be between the trans and the transfer case. In this case, I believe this was a bolted in the Bronco to a Dana 20 transfer case, which we'll probably also be doing a video for you, by the way. These adapters don't have much room to get your socket in there. So anyway, the adapter doesn't leave you a lot of room here to get a socket. Or initially we were going to use the impact or swivel socket, but that won't even fit over the head of the bolt. That's why I went with the chrome and a wobbly extension, and even that's proven tough for us there. Yeah. Okay, so we got one. The other one back here in the bottom. We forced that one out. Looks like the top two we're just going to have to grab with a open end wrench and do the slow method. So we ended up having to just wrench those two top bolts out. That'll leave you enough room to get a socket in there. Matter of fact, look, the bolt doesn't even want to come out of there right now. So anyway, that's our adapter from trans to transfer case. What we're going to work on next is getting snap ring here for this rear bearing on the main shaft, and then the outer snap ring also, which gap feels like it's down here somewhere. And we'll work on getting the snap rings off, get the bearings off front and rear, and then we'll have to work on our rear cover here for the counter shaft or counter gear. because it'll have to drop down in the case somewhat before it'll allow us to get the main shaft up through the main housing or main case itself. So we had a little afterthought here, or I did anyway, on the top cover for our new process 435. When we first started out, we showed you that the unit was locked up. Well, I had noticed before we pulled the top cover, it looked like the bolts had been off of it before. So obviously, I think what had happened is someone had had this cover off for whatever reason, inspect it, maybe take a look inside or whatever. And a common mistake is when they reassemble the cover, they miss, especially on this little shift fork right here, which is our reverse slider. So we noticed looking down in the top cover that it looked like it had been shifted into second gear, okay? But it didn't want to turn. And I believe what had happened was they missed the reverse slider. Thereby, we had the transmission in second and reverse, which of course is going to lock the unit up, okay? The reverse is a slider. As I mentioned, there's nothing to hold it in place. It literally just wants to move. If you tip the unit, it will slide itself, where the synchros themselves will not do that. Once you lock them, they'll usually stay in place. So once we got everything back into a neutral condition, we could turn the shafts easily, okay? And I just wanted to mention that because it's a common problem. And also, if remember, we noticed we were missing inserts on the shift forks. Those were probably lost when they had that cover also off the unit. So wanted to mention that to you. Next, we're going to go through, and we've set up a couple of pieces of tape and cardboard on here. Thought it'd be kind of cool to show you the different gear ratios in this transmission. I mentioned before, I believe that this thing has a very what we would call slang low gear ratio. First gear, guys really like that. They call it a granny low or a rock crawler. Very desirable for the guys in the Jeeps and the rock crawlers. Okay, and this one is something like 5 or 6 to 1. We're going to show you that in each gear. And so we set up these two pieces of tape and cardboard on here, and I'm going to run you through each gear, first, second, third, fourth, and reverse, and let you see the different ratios. Thought that would be kind of interesting for you guys to see. So let's show you a little bit about how this thing works. We've got our high dollar cardboard and tape on each of the shafts, input and output. We're in a neutral state right now, so let's just show you. Those will turn independent of each other, okay? Now, we're gonna try and put those straight up, and we'll run through each gear for you, starting with first gear. So as we were to shift the top cover, the fork that sits in here would slide this gear back, engaging. I need to move the shaft back, okay? And that would give us our first gear, all right, what they call the granny low or rock crawler. So let's see how many times the input shaft turns to get one turn out of the output shaft, all right? There's one revolution already. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's about straight up on the output shaft. We've gone almost 6 3/4 turns. That's quite the reduction ratio there. 6.3, 6.5, I don't know what the exact number is. We'd have to look it up in the book, but that's why the guys like it for the rock crawling abilities. Let the clutch out and this thing would just walk pretty much anywhere it wants to, just at extremely low speed. So let's go to second, okay? Slide that guy forward, okay? It's gonna wanna slide out on me a little bit. Oops, sorry, let's start with a neutral condition here. Get our shaft straightened back up, okay? There we go. Hopefully that'll stay forward. All right, here we go again. Second gear. We've got 1, 2, 3. Yeah, a little over 3 1/4. So still got a pretty low ratio, or high numerical as we would refer to it. All right. Out of second, back to a neutral state. Got to get her off of the gear there. Okay, get them both straight up. Now, slide this guy back. This will be third gear. The whole thing's moving. Okay, we got her locked in there. And they're a little off. Okay. 1. About 1 3/4 turns to get 1 turn out of the output shaft. So move that back to a neutral state. Line these guys up again, and we'll go for 4th gear. What's the ratio on 4th gear? Direct drive. That should be 1 to 1. Okay, 1 turn of the input, 1 turn of the output. All right. There we have it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to do reverse. Okay, for that we're going to need our screwdriver in place of the shift lever. We're going to come in here behind the reverse slider, move that forward. See if we can get her. There it is. Okay, we're engaged right there. Now this will be a reduction ratio also, but it'll be opposite direction. So notice I'm turning the shaft this way, shaft's going the opposite. I'm thinking this is in the 3s or something. I don't remember. There's 1, 2, a lot more than 3. That is 3, 4, 5, 6. Hell, we're at 7. Damn near 8. Damn near 8 to 1 ratio. You could do your rock crawling in reverse, man. Forget about 1st gear. What we used to call 9 grand reverse burnouts there. So anyway, that's all your gear ratios right there. As simple as that, and it's 4-speed. Okay? If it were a 3-speed, when we shifted to 3rd gear, which would be up front here instead of 4th, we would be a 1 to 1 ratio. The others would be reduction as well as reverse, of course. So we'll finish taking this thing apart and show you how that happens. So just to give you some examples, we talked about the ratios on this, 1st gear being 6 point something to 1. Compare that to a lot of your other standard transmissions, which are going to probably be in the 2.5 to 3.5 1st gear ratio. Okay, most of your automatics, 2.5 is very common. When you got into the overdrives, and those jump to 2.7, I think, something like that, maybe 3.0. All right, the biggest advantage of this, obviously, is that low 1st gear ratio, the stump pulling torque. As I mentioned to Robert before, I had one of these in my old truck, pulling a very large boat behind it with that granny low. You could launch the thing at the intersection. You were pulling 2nd gear, though, before you even got rolling, literally. Okay, I used to do the same thing in my Camaro when I was racing that. Could launch it in 1st gear, 6,000 RPM, but you were catching 2nd gear literally before the front tires came down and hit the ground. Okay, a lot of low-end torque and power, not a lot of speed, but the advantage of what I wanted to mention to you is these, when you get to 4th gear, the best you got is 1 to 1. The advantage with an automatic is going to be that they have the overdrive on the 700 R4s, AODs, so forth, the Chrysler units, okay? And that's going to be a 0.67, 0.7 to 1, so that you lower the RPM for highway cruising. Obviously, for the rock crawler guys and stuff like that, they don't give a shit about the overdrive, okay? They ain't going down the highway at 65 miles an hour. They just want to crawl over those big rocks and tear their shit up. So we'll continue on our disassembly of the 4-speed here. Mentioned the snap rings before. What I'm going to do is just the inner snap ring first here on that output or main shaft. See if we can get that guy released. Some of these can be a real bitch to get off of here. And it looks like this one's going to be too. You can spread them, but they'll stick in the groove itself. So we'll just keep working it. At some point, we'll either get it released or we won't. Fortunately, these snap rings are available, and I would recommend, if you have to stretch them as far as I'm having to stretch this one, that you do replace them if you're going to go ahead and build the unit. You can straighten them out, and I've done it before, but you do kind of weaken them. So it's best usually just to get what they call a small parts kit, and that'll usually come with all your snap rings for you, so you don't have to worry about the ones that you destroy like we're probably going to do here. We're going to have to actually work this around the groove itself. Probably as soon as I let go with my pocket screwdriver, it's going to go right back in the groove again and we start over again. So we'll keep working it and see if we can get it. The whole main shaft wants to come out with it. What I was hoping to do is get this snap ring off, leave the outer one in, put that back in place, and then we're going to try hammering on this output shaft here to try and walk the output shaft through the center of the bearing itself. If we can do that, then we can get hopefully enough of that bearing to come off the shaft, give us enough slack, if you will, to be able to get our main shaft off of here. So if you check back in about an hour, I probably ought to have this off of here. Upper part, okay. So what we need to do, what did I do with a hammer? We're going to try and knock the other end of this snap ring out because it's stuck in the groove. There we go. We're going to walk this a little bit. If we get lucky. She's working out of there slowly, very slowly. Oh, I can't get underneath there. All right, try snap ring pliers one more time, see if we can get the rest of it. There it is. Now, if Robert can get a shot of that snap ring, you can see that I've way overstretched it. It's twisted, oversized. Little trick we used to do, and if necessary and you can't get a snap ring, is you can actually straighten these things out. A couple pairs of pliers to twist them kind of back to flat, and then you can actually work the snap ring with a hammer like that, and you can actually bring it back into shape. Like I said, my recommendation, get a small parts kit, and hopefully it'll come with new snap rings. So,
according to my analytics, many of you have not subscribed. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell too, so you don't miss out on any future videos.
Okay, so we're trying to get that rear bearing kind of flush, if you will, with the case itself to get the shaft to run through. It's already walked off there a little bit, so maybe it won't fight. I got an air hammer. We're going to work on the end of the shaft, try and walk it through, see if we can get her to go. Another thing too is you got enough hands available, you can pry on your bearing at the same time as rattling it. Okay. She starts to walk off. I think we got her pretty close. Now it's just a matter of working it a little bit, and I think it'll come off for us. Work that. Okay. Got that rear bearing off. Got this little spacer sleeve that sits on the main shaft there directly behind it. All right. Now, let's see how much slack, if you will, that's given us. Our input fourth gear is already kind of falling out of the case here. All right. That was kind of our goal, was to get enough movement of the main shaft here that would allow us to get that input fourth gear out of the case itself. So that worked out pretty good. Now we need to get a loose piece of the synchro collar out of there, get that out of the way. That guy sets over the splines on that input fourth gear. And as you can probably see the bearings coming out of, they sit in a pocket. They sit in a pocket right down there. And those are to support the input to output shaft. I'll show you that a little closer when we get the main shaft or output shaft out of the case. Okay, we've got a bearing also sits between here and the main shaft. That comes out. And then we see how much of the synchro we can get out of there. That would be our synchro, most of the synchro assembly for third and fourth gear. That guy sits there. And then we've got another inner part to that. The hub, usually referred to as a hub, sits in there. And that would kind of be your basic synchro assembly for third, fourth gear. These are the actual friction surfaces that do the gripping or grabbing of each gear as you're trying to shift. So when you shift, you're trying to slide this collar towards that. You're trying to create friction between this piece and this piece to make the two shafts or two gears match speeds so that you can make the shift. Usually what I do on something like this, just a little side note, a little tip, is we make a mark a lot of times on the synchro assemblies when we take them out so we know which way is forward, okay, front of the vehicle. So what I would do is take something and scratch a mark here, or very carefully take a cutter, die grinder kind of thing and just mark it. And I just simply know that that faces forward because a lot of these are directional and it does make a difference on which way they're reassembled. So that'll help us at that point. Now, if we've done good, we should be able to lift the main shaft and the remaining gears right up out of the case. If we don't have enough room, we'll have to lower the counter shaft to give us that room. And this guy's gonna come pretty much right out of there. There's the remainder of our main shaft. First, second, and third gear here on that main shaft itself. Set that on there. Now what we got to deal with is the counter gear down in the case. All right. And then also down here, I think getting a hold of that if Robert can get a shot of that. That's our reverse slider that we're removing for first gear. When it's forward, that's the reverse position. When it's back here is when it's not used. So next we'll work on getting the counter gear out and then that idler. We'll get our counter gear cover off back here. It's got a little bearing inside of it. Get a screwdriver in behind here. That guy comes out, and there's our little row of needle bearings in there that supports the counter gear in the back of the case. And once again, kind of like the input to output bearing, we've got a little caged bearing right there that sits down in that pocket. Kind of controls the forward to rearward thrust or movement of that counter gear shaft. Now, once again, depending on if we've got enough room, just kind of like getting the main shaft out, we're going to see if our counter shaft or counter gear will come up out of there. Looks like we may have enough room. I'm going to have to roll this up. All right, try and lift this counter gear out of there. There we go. That's the guy we were going after. Counter gear. Got a thrust washer on the front side rather than a thrust bearing. Once again, just controls how much movement that counter gear has down in the bottom of the case. We need to limit that. All right. Go. And the last thing for disassembly is going to be that little reverse slider, idler gear sometimes it's referred to, back of the case. He's got his own shaft to support him. And that would be this guy right here, retained by a bolt and a little retainer. Get some of the crap off of it so we can get a socket on there. That bolt. And usually you got to knock the retainer out. That's all that is. So what we're going to do is take a punch, long punch, come in through the front of the case, and we're going to try and whack that shaft out through the back of the case. And that's the shaft that supports that little reverse idler. These are a press fit, by the way, so they can be a bear to get knocked out of the case. Sometimes you got to get a bigger hammer. I think we're moving.
We're moving.
Yeah. Now, there comes the tricky part, because I'm going to run out of places to try and smack on this. It's going to want to slip off on there. But we'll give her a couple more hits and see if we can still drive it through. Well, it looks like maybe we get lucky. Okay, as far as we can get with that. Now what I usually do is either skinnier punch or screwdriver. I think we've gone far enough. We've passed the press fit of that shaft. Okay, we're going to slide that out of the back of the case, and then our reverse idler comes right up out of there. Little note on this one, this reverse idler, notice the wear on the front side of these teeth. Okay, that's going to face front of the trans. Wear on here is going to be from contact with this first gear, which is actually used in reverse. Okay? No synchronizer between these two, nothing to match the speeds between the two. So both shafts have to stop turning, or this shaft and this gear, and then we make contact here with the gear itself. So we will see wear on those gears, and that amount of wear, I would say, just off the top of my head looking at it real quick, is probably going to be okay to reuse. Just remember that faces front of the trans. So initially this gear did have somewhat of a taper on the leading edge of it as compared to kind of a straight cut back here, if you can see that. And that matches, if you will, makes the engagement a little bit smoother. Same thing here. These teeth initially had a little taper where this side is flat. So those need to face each other once assembled in the trans. Okay, our support shaft for our reverse idler. Just wanted to show you one thing here. That little retainer with the bolt goes into that slot once it's assembled into the transmission case. Keeps that shaft from trying to walk out the back of the case. Bottom of the case, Robert's got a couple close-ups, I think, of the case, the magnet, so forth, and what we found down in here. A couple of pieces are our little inserts for the shift forks. Obviously had fallen off, or somebody dropped them when they pulled that top cover. And where those go is right onto the shift fork itself. So each of those would have one of those plastic inserts. And that's something that'll normally come in your overhaul kit. This guy here for the reverse idler, he does not use any kind of plastic inserts.
Real quick, if this content is adding value, please let us know by hitting that like button. It does help the channel, and we do appreciate it.
So we'll do last of the disassembly here on the main shaft itself. Okay, the first gear should just slide right off the back of the shaft itself. This is the synchro friction surface for that first gear. Third gear still left on the shaft up here, simply slides off the front. That leaves us with second gear right here. And what we've got to do there is get snap ring off here, get that unlocked to be able to release this gear off the shaft itself. Okay, we got to get the snap ring off of the second gear. It sets against the lip back here, so it's got to come forward, but it's got this funky snap ring on it here. We've got to try and get released. It kind of locks over itself, if I remember correctly. So we've got to kind of pry it out and away and over the little notch that's on there. And I can just see this pick coming back and stabbing myself here. So we got our pick started in here, pocket screwdriver. I went ahead and put it in the vise so we wouldn't have to chase it around the bench too much, hopefully. There we go. We got lucky, got it started. She started to walk out of there. There we go. Now, we can get the other end to walk also, because they've got to kind of unhook from each other. Bigger screwdriver would probably be good, but there we go. So those two guys are a little different style of snap ring. If I can get him out of there. When assembled, they kind of sit in there like that. Okay, we got our snap ring off. Should be able to just lift second gear right off the shaft itself with the synchro friction surface, as well as the little spring that they've got inside there, a little spiral spring. And that would pretty much complete our disassembly.
This show is a ton of hours to produce, and we could really use your help. Believe it or not, there are a number of ways that you can get involved. Check out the video description down below to learn more. So you just got done watching the teardown video. We're also going to be doing a video on the inspection of this unit. And this unit had a transfer case bolted to it before it hit the bench. And naturally, we're going to be doing a video on that as well. We've got a lot in store for you. That being said, make sure you subscribe and don't forget to hit that notification bell too, so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. Once again, my name's Robert, and I will see you next time.